Hello! Let's join my football channel starting today with the Copa do Brasil, quarter-final round second leg, results last night. Fluminense beat Sport Club Bahia 2-0. Fluminense won by aggregate 2-1. Corinthians beat Club Atlético Paranaense 2-0. Corinthians won by aggregate 3-0. The Copa do Brasil, quarter-final round second leg, September 12, 5:30 a.m. Indochina time 7. Cruzeiro vs Atlético Mineiro, 7:30 a.m. Botafogo vs Vasco da Gama, Indonesian Liga 1 football, season 2025-26 matchday 4, September 11, 3:30 p.m. Indochina time. Seaman Padang FC vs Persatuan Sepak Bola Biak, Persita Tangerang vs PSM Makassar 7 p.m., September 12, 3:15 p.m. Persib Bandung vs Persebaya Surabaya, Persik Kediri vs Malat United, Madura United vs Bayangkara Persisi 7 p.m. Malaysian Super League Football, Season 2025-26 Matchday 5, September 11, 7:15 p.m. Johor Darul Tazim vs Penang FA, September 19, 8 p.m. Terengganu FC vs Malacca FC. J1 League Football from Japan, Season 2025-26 Matchday 29, September 12, 5 p.m. Machida Zelvia vs Yokohama FC, Sanfrecce Hiroshima vs Kyoto Sanga, Vissel Kobe vs Kashiwa Reysol, September 13, 4 p.m. Avispa Fukuoka vs Cerezo Osaka, September 13, 4:55 p.m. Ajiano Okayama vs Nagoya Grampus, 5 p.m. Gamba Osaka vs Arawa Red Diamonds, Kashima Antlers vs Shonen Belmare, Albirex Niigata vs Shimizu Espals, Yokohama F Marinos vs Kawasaki Frontale, September 15, 5 p.m. FC Tokyo vs Tokyo Verde. K1 League from Korea, Season 2025-26 Matchday 29, September 13, 5 p.m. Kangwon FC vs FC Seoul, Pohang Steelers vs Ulsan Hyundai FC, Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors vs Daejeon Citizen FC, September 14, 5 p.m. Suwon FC vs Gwangju FC, Gimcheon Sangmu FC vs Daegu FC, FC Anyang vs Jeju SK Football Club. Saudi Pro League Football, Season 2025-26 Matchday 2, September 12, 10:25 p.m. Al Ettifaq FC vs Al Ahly Saudi, 10:35 p.m. Al Shabab FC Saudi vs Al Hazm, September 13, 1 a.m. Al Ittihad FC vs Al Fateh SC, September 13, 10:25 p.m. Al Khalij Club vs Al Fayha FC, 10:45 p.m. Al Akdad Club vs Al Tawan FC, September 14, 1 a.m. Al Hilal vs Al Qadsiyah, September 14, 10:35 p.m. Al Riyadh SC vs Al Najma, Damak FC vs Niam SC, September 15, 1 a.m. Al Nasser SC vs Al Khalid. Chinese Super League Football, Season 2025-26 Matchday 24, September 12, 5 p.m. Shanghai Port FC vs Yunnan Yukon, 6:35 p.m. Chengdu Ronqing vs Chongqing Yada, Henan FC vs Beijing Goan, 7 p.m. Shanghai Shenhua FC vs Shandong Taishan FC, September 13, 6:35 p.m. Qingdao West Coast vs Zhejiang FC, September 14, 6 p.m. Dalian Ningbo FC vs Shenzhen Ping City, 6:35 p.m. Tianjin Jinmen Tiger vs Wuhan Three Towns FC, Vietnamese V-League 1 football, season 2025-26 matchday 4, September 13, 7:15 p.m. Sungin Ho Chi Minh City vs Nam Dinh FC, Sungin Hanoi vs Haiphong FC, September 20 at 6 p.m. Dong Tan Hoa vs Haiphong FC, PVF Songin Nandan FC vs SHB Danang, Hanoi FC vs the Viettel FC, Thai League 1 football, season 2025-26 matchday 4, September 12, 7 p.m. Uthai Thani FC vs BG Pathum United, Buriram United vs Prachwap FC, September 13, 6 p.m. Chonburi FC vs Bangkok United, 6:30 p.m. Sukhothai FC vs Lamphan Warriors, 7 p.m. Ratchaburi FC vs Gunla Ruaport FC, September 14, 6 p.m. Rayong FC vs Muang Thong United, 6:30 p.m. Ayutthaya United vs Chiang Rai United, September 14, 7 p.m. Kanchanaburi FC vs Nakhon Ratchasima FC, English Premier League Football, Season 2025-26 Matchday 4, September 13, 6:30 p.m. Arsenal vs Nottingham Forest, 9 p.m. Everton vs Aston Villa, Newcastle United vs Wolverhampton Wanderers, Crystal Palace vs Sunderland, AFC Bournemouth vs Brighton and Hove Albion, Fulham vs Leeds United, 11:30 p.m. West Ham United vs Tottenham Hotspur, September 14, 2 a.m. Brentford vs Chelsea, September 14, 8 p.m. Burnley vs Liverpool, 10:30 p.m. Manchester City vs Manchester United, Spanish La Liga football, season 2025-26 matchday 4, September 13, 2 a.m. Sevilla vs Elche, 7 p.m. Getafe CF vs Real Oviedo, 9:15 p.m. Real Sociedad vs Real Madrid, 11:30 p.m. Athletic Bilbao vs Deportivo Alaves, September 14th 2 a.m. Atletico Madrid vs Villarreal, September 14th 7 p.m. Celta de Vigo vs Girona, 9:15 p.m. Levante vs Real Betis, 11:30 p.m. Osasuna vs Rayo Vallecano, September 15th 2 a.m. Barcelona vs Valencia. French Ligue 1 football, season 2025-26 matchday 4, September 13th 1:45 a.m. Olympique Marseille vs FC Lorient, September 13th 10 p.m. Nice vs Nantes, September 14th 2:05 a.m. Auxerre vs Monaco, September 14th 8 p.m. Lille vs Toulouse, 10:15 p.m. Brest vs Paris FC, Paris Saint-Germain vs Lens, Metz vs Angers, Strasbourg vs Le Havre, September 15th 1:45 a.m. Rennes vs Olympique Lyon, German Bundesliga football, season 2025-26 matchday 3, September 13th 1:30 a.m. Bayer Leverkusen vs Eintracht Frankfurt, September 13th 8:30 p.m. Mainz vs RB Leipzig, FC Heidenheim vs Borussia Dortmund, Union Berlin vs TSG Hoffenheim, Wolfsburg vs FC Cologne, September 13th 11:30 p.m. Bayern Munich vs Hamburg SV, September 14th 8:30 p.m. St. Pauli vs FC Augsburg, September 14th 10:30 p.m. Borussia Mönchengladbach vs Werder Bremen, Calcio Serie A football, season 2025-26 matchday 3, September 13th 8 p.m. Cagliari vs Parma, 11 p.m. Juventus vs Inter Milano, September 14th 1:45 a.m. Fiorentina vs Napoli, September 14th 5:30 p.m. Roma vs Torino, September 14th 8 p.m. Pisa vs Udinese, Atalanta vs Lecce, 11 p.m. Sassuolo vs Lazio, September 15th 1:45 a.m. AC Milan vs Bologna, September 15th 11:30 p.m. Hellas Verona vs Cremonese, September 16th 1:45 a.m. Como vs Genoa,